Hello one and all, and welcome back to 4FS Gaming. This is Doc, reporting in once again after far too long an absence, but still ready to make videos once again for the channel. This time, we're heading back to Battlefront 2 to have a look at the newest heroes that have somehow actually made their way into the game. Those two heroes being the cute, lovable, and ever marketable Resistance droid BB-8, and the one that was actually introduced in The Rise of Skywalker that I'm not too sure about because I haven't seen the movie yet, but is just as cute and marketable, BB-9E. We're going to be reviewing their similarities together in this first video, since they do share some core traits that define their playstyles. Originally, both were actually going to be covered in this same first video, but looking at all the unique things each one brings to the fight, they actually really do deserve their own videos. But let's get the basics out of the way and see how they move around and actually play. To start, they are both incredibly small and nimble targets, obviously so. They have two dashes, just like most classes in the game, they give a high amount of damage reduction, and they travel a good distance. The dashes are also very hard to differentiate between their normal movement animations, since the dash doesn't really have its own distinctive animation. They are also the only ground units that are not force users that do not suffer from the slowdown effects of jumping over and over and over again. For those of you who aren't actually aware of what I'm talking about, in Battlefront 2, the more times you actually jump in a row in quick succession, the slower you'll travel in the air, and once you finally decide to land and start running, your ground speed and acceleration will be terrible for a few seconds. Force users don't actually suffer from this problem because their jumps are more like glides. But the BB twins can actually keep full momentum while sprinting, dashing, and more importantly, jumping around, which is hugely important to their game plan due to how their primary weapons actually work. The similarities also extend to their passive abilities. Like all heroes, they gain health on eliminations, and they also have a second passive ability called Technical Support. This makes them act like two units while capturing a control point and allow them to activate objectives twice as fast, such as slicing into a terminal or arming and disarming bombs, making them really useful in objective-focused game modes. The last similarity that these two droids share is actually in their primary weapon, but not 100%. Both of their primary weapons are hit-scan shock weapons that have a short 7-meter range in front of them. They can pulse 3 times per second, can pulse 31 times before running out of charge. However, once they're actually out of energy, they will actually pulse 2 times per second, which means that they can at least still defend themselves if they are out of charge. The only difference to keep in mind between these two is that BB-8 does more raw damage, whereas BB-9E actually has a shock effect applied to pulses every 4.5 seconds, acting similarly to a shock or stun effect from other abilities of different classes. But now, on to the specifics of each droid, and in this video, like I said, we're going to be going over BB-8's specific parameters. For such a small droid, he actually packs a lot of potential damage in his abilities and can further augment these with his star cards. But let's actually just start with his pure support abilities, and there are actually only 2 of them in his kit. Alongside having better objective play and healing on kills, he also has Swift Reaction as his third passive ability, which will speed up allied ability recharge when they stand in a very close proximity to BB-8. By my guess, this radius is about 5 meters. While this range is pretty short, it's not really too much of a detriment considering that BB-8 and BB-9E both want to stay close to large groups of teammates at all times. And unfortunately, with no real consistent way to test how much the recharge actually is, or how much it increases the recharge of allied abilities, it's kinda hard to pin down. We know for a fact that there's a star card that can improve it by a further 15%, assuming you have the max level. And speaking of star cards, there are actually a lot of really good star cards that BB-8 has access to. So every time I mention an ability, I'll probably go over one of the star cards that can actually positively affect it. And if I ever mention that there's a star card you can use, assume that the values I give are for the max possible improvements with the max level star card. Moving swiftly along to his active abilities, starting with the left, we have Resistance Backing. This ability acts like a scan pulse that marks all enemies within a 25-meter radius of BB-8 for the short active time of 12 seconds. Any enemy that is tagged with the scan pulse will take roughly 5% more damage from all allied attacks, even your own. This can be improved by a further 12.5% with the relevant star card. I say roughly 5% because in my testing I got anywhere from 2 up to 8%, so I'm just going right in the middle. And finally, it has a cooldown of 18 seconds, so if you have it available and you suspect that there are enemies nearby, or even a single enemy that you want to hunt down, there's no real reason not to use it because of the snappy cooldown. Next up, we're going to be talking about his right ability, which is a fairly boring standard charging bash called Rolling Charge. It does 200 damage to normal troops and reinforcements, meaning you can kill any normal trooper and some jet troopers outright, and seriously damage anything else. It also has quite a strong push effect, allowing for pushing people off of objective points or off of the map, and knocking them down to allow your team to finish off a specific target pretty easily. One thing I noticed and caught during testing is that this only does 150 damage to opposing villains, but again, this is a flat number, meaning that even if a lightsaber user blocks it, they will still take the full 150 damage, lose stamina, and lower their guard. The two damage numbers I mentioned can both be improved by 40 damage with a certain star card, and the ability has a base cooldown of 10 seconds with no way to improve it. Now for a few weird things about the attack that I noticed again during testing. It only lasts for around 2 seconds, and you have little to no control at all during the actual charging animation, which means that this attack is best used at point-blank range, since you can't steer, you can't make any final corrections, and you definitely cannot go around corners expecting to hit somebody with this attack. And the hitbox itself is quite narrow, meaning if you are not charging directly into an opponent, the attack is likely to completely miss. You can also technically cancel the dash attack early by about half a second. In my testing, if you start to move away from the direction of the bash will actually end in roughly 1.5 seconds. Your movement speed is also capped, a little bit lower than your normal sprinting speed, and the bash offers no damage reduction during the animation itself. To get any sort of protection, you need to use a star card. With the highest level of that star card, you can get up to 60% damage reduction during the dash animation, but like I said, the animation is so short at only around 2 seconds that it's really not that useful. You're better off taking a star card for one of his other two abilities, especially the last ability that we are going to go over, which is Cable Spin. Right off the bat, let's lead with something pretty obvious about the ability. It has one of the highest potential damage values in the entire game, and makes BB-8 terrifying to get close to. So let's get right into why this ability is actually really terrifying. First off, it slows down BB-8 heavily, and gives roughly a 50% damage reduction during its active time. And the active time lasts for 8 seconds, which, believe it or not, is the only stat of this ability that cannot be improved with star cards. Every other aspect can be improved. The range, by default, is 4 meters, but can be upped to 6. It does 45 damage per hit, about 3 times every second, for a total of 26 hits over the 8-second active time. The damage can be upgraded to 53 damage per hit, and after doing some quick math, we find out that the total potential damage of the cables is 1,180. This is enough to kill literally any non-vehicle enemy you will encounter. With the improved damage card, this potential damage goes up to 1,378. To give those numbers some context and to provide a little bit of extra perspective, with those kinds of damage numbers, you can kill any hero with 600 health in a little over or under 4 seconds. Only 4 seconds. And as well, those damage numbers are actually for any enemy that is around you and within range. Since this is an area of effect attack, anyone caught in it will take full damage. Well, I can maybe hear some of you saying, I'm not entirely sure. What about the cooldown? It must be pretty lengthy if it has all this power. And you'd be correct. The base cooldown of 25 seconds isn't terrible, but it will definitely prevent you from using this ability whenever you feel like. But if you position yourself carefully, have a certain star card equipped in handy, and hit at least 2 enemies, the cooldown will be reduced to an incredibly fast 15 seconds, even faster than your scan pulse ability. On top of all these amazing features and improvements with the star cards, there's something that makes them even better. One final trait that makes this ability the ultimate sweeping threat on objectives. The cables are transcendent. They go through short obstacles. Obstacles that are tall enough to completely hide BB-8 behind, but short enough the cables will still go through them. So in summary, not only does this ability do insane damage, make you tankier, have a wide range, and is on a short cooldown with the right circumstances, it can also be incredibly safe to use in situations that are far more common than one might expect. Well, quite frankly, after that little bit of insanity with the stats, I think that it's time to go over some quick tactics as to how you can play BB-8 effectively. BB-8 is a strange case of a hero that excels when supporting his team, and also can exclusively support his team, but can also go alone against even the toughest opponents and win fairly easily if the enemy is not prepared for the sheer amount of damage that BB-8 can put out. The damage potential of the Cable Spin alone makes him a premier threat to anyone close to him, and his other two abilities mean that he can always find you, chase you down, knock you over, and finally zap or whip you to your demise. But he really is at his best supporting groups of teammates, who serve as distractions while the little droid can put in work, wreaking havoc on the enemy while buffing his team and giving them intel all at the same time. And another thing to keep in mind, even though your damage is really, really high with your Cable Spin ability, the damage output is severely limited in range, as none of your options have very good range at all. So open areas close to enemies is a very quick way to get your little head blown clean off. Bottom line, if you're not sure where to be, the answer is most often going to be next to your team, supporting them any way you can. Whether this involves buffing their ability recharge times, helping with objectives, or simply killing literally everything around you. It all depends on the situation you and your team are in. And on that note, that will bring an end to this hero review. What do you guys all think of BB-8? Is he balanced? Is he overpowered? Or do you really just not care and you just think he's plain fun to play, and you don't care about how effective he may or may not be? Let us know by leaving a comment down below. In the meantime, the BB9E video will be out soon, so we can get a full picture of all the differences between the light and the dark side. This has been Doc from 4FS Gaming. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see all of you in the next one.